The country has been captivated for days at the standoff in Nevada between a ranch owner and the feds. The Bureau of Land Management, which basically owns the entire Desert West, has backed off prior threats of force to collect more than $1 million in grazing fees the agency says it's owed by Cliven Bundy. The stare-down has drawn supporters, sometimes armed, from both sides and ignited a larger battle over property rights and federal power. Joining us now is an old friend of the show who's been fighting for the federal government for decades, even while sometimes serving it. He is former Congressman and presidential candidate Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
You're welcome. Nice to be with you.
So tell us what you think about this standoff. I saw that you were saying on Fox News the other day that you're heartened by the prospect of more Americans standing up to abuse from the government, and then in the same breath you warned that it could lead to more Waco-like incidents. Right. Where are you on this right now?
Right. Well, I'm still concerned about what's happening, but you look for the victories when you can get them, and the victory is that when the people stand up, sometimes you can push the government back a little bit, and I saw that as a victory. Also, I'm a strong advocate for nonviolent demonstrations against abuse of government by government. And although there were a lot of guns there, no guns were fired, nobody was shot, nobody was hurt. So at least there's a temporary victory. It may be just a victory of a skirmish, but I'll tell you what, it was better than guns blaring and people being killed and the whole thing being settled that way. But I suspect the feds will be back because authoritarians are authoritarians and they don't want to give up their authority. So there's plenty of people there that are gunning to go after the Bundy family.
Did you, when you were in Congress, either yourself or with colleagues, do active work on trying to, I don't know, privatize some of the Mountain West of the United States? It's kind of appalling how much the United States government owns of Nevada and Arizona and Utah.
Yes, and I talked about it. We may have introduced legislation, but it was sort of an overwhelming task. Fortunately, I was from a state of Texas that didn't have the same problem. But no, I've looked into that and thought it was terrible. It would lead to trouble. But, you know, technically the answers can be found because traditionally from 1787 up until 1864, it was known to be when you became a state, the property went to the states and the federal government gave up on those properties. And then when Nevada came in, they changed the rules and they sort of followed that afterwards. So if Congress would reassert themselves, you know, these properties could be turned over to the states. But, you know, tradition now is such that, you know, the feds are in there strong, and the tradition now is everybody assumes that Fed is necessary. They have to be there to tell you how to manage land. But, of course, if you look at Texas, Texas came into the Union with all private land, and we've done quite well with development and watching for natural resources. So I think it's a mess the way it is now because when it's belonged to everybody, it doesn't belong to anybody.
Tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, the commons, everybody is it's up for grabs. So you have the ranchers and you have the oil people and the gold people, the environmentalists, the bureaucrats, and maybe the solar farmers. Who knows what's going on there? So, no, it's a mess. Private property ownership is the answer to many of our problems and certainly would have been an answer to this problem. Hopefully, this demonstration shows you can do things peacefully and bring about a debate. Hopefully, the debate now says that the answer is private property ownership to avoid these kind of conflicts.
Well, Dr. Paul, circumstances being as they are, there has been a federal court ruling here in the case of Mr. Bundy. What is a good outcome here? What does that look like? Is it just the federal government stepping out of the situation altogether and kind of letting him do what he wants to do, or should something else happen?
Well, the ultimate best thing to do is get the feds out and reinstate the position of the Northwest Territories and say that when you bring a state into the Union, you turn over all the land of the states, which is a major undertaking. But in the meantime, it is a complex legal battle because there's no sharp definition of property ownership here. But right now, I want the federal government to stand down. I don't want them to abuse the power and come in and a family that's been using that land with an understanding that they had de facto ownership or control of that land since 1870, that there should be some respect for that, instead of saying, well, we're going to throw you out and take your cows and shoot you if you don't behave. That's the worst way to do it.
Now, Dr. Paul, you're involved in a standoff of your own with the federal government over the IRS demanding that your nonprofit Campaign for Liberty disclose all your donors or face fines. Are you being treated differently than other 501c4s out there?
The best I can tell, yes, but not the only ones. There was a court case way back in the 1950s with the NAACP in Alabama, I believe, and the Supreme Court ruled that you don't have to give up these names for privacy reasons. And there was another court case since then, and of course, people who understand privacy, we shouldn't have to. But the IRS regulation says, you have to do this. Interestingly enough, they did this to us 2 years ago, and we wrote a legal opinion on why we shouldn't be fined and why we don't have to turn over these names, and they didn't bother, so they accepted that. They didn't fine us, and now they're coming back again. And somebody says, well, it's just a coincidence. Well, I don't quite buy into that after all the news we read about on the IRS. So yes, I think it is, but most people do not, have to file names. I imagine there are a few others who have been forced to, but as we all know, the IRS is a political tool. And it's been used against different groups. It's been used both by Republicans and Democrats over the years to deal with their enemies.
Dr. Paul, I'm wondering how far you're willing to go with this, how far you're willing to take this battle with the IRS.
Well, I hope just as far as we had to 2 years ago, write our piece and see if we can. And actually, the accountant and the attorney feels like we really have a case. But, what does that mean? Just because you have a case doesn't mean you're going to win. But as of now, we don't have the intention of sitting down and writing all those names down and giving to those people. So it can get very messy. But I guess we always hope for the best and hope that people will come around to accepting the way the law ought to be, and that we can rein in the IRS. The sentiment with the American people now are with us and with all the other people who have been abused by the IRS. And right now, you'd think the IRS would back down and be a little bit more polite, because some of the officials there are facing federal charges for the abuses that they have put on us. So I think it's a key battle. It's a very good argument for getting rid of the entire income tax system. That would be the best thing to do for a solution.
Dr. Paul, one last question. Last week, actually back on the 10th, at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website, a gentleman named Paul Craig Roberts wrote about the 9/11 and suggested that the United States government was somehow complicit in that attack. I know in the past you've spoken out forcefully and criticized folks who have spun such conspiracy theories. He actually did this on your website. Do you have anything to say about that, sir?
Well, it's just that people should have a right to express their viewpoints. If you read 99% of the article, it was a fantastic article. But that doesn't mean that.
Yeah, but that 1% is pretty nasty stuff, Dr. Paul.
I know, but that doesn't. That doesn't mean that I endorse what he says, obviously. So I think that's a little bit overkill with political correctness. People know my position. I've stated on national television enough times. But Paul Craig Roberts has some very good views on war and civil liberties, and he shouldn't be excluded because he takes this particular position. But that wasn't the thrust of the article. So I don't think that to me, it's the people who overly criticize something like that probably the ones who have the problem, because I don't think that I think most people realize exactly what my position is, and I think the government. See, the other reason of the confusion is I don't believe in government commissions. I don't believe government commissions ever get to the bottom of anything, whether it's an assassination committee or any type of commission they set up. They're set up to cover the government, to protect the government and make sure that nobody's guilty of anything.